It is the BJ Show. He is John. I am Brad. It is John Combest, more appropriately. Combest runs a website every single day of his life for the past 22 years. He updates it and puts in what he feels are the top stories going on around the state of Missouri, politics, news, all that kind of stuff. And we start the show off every morning with John Combest. Say hi, John.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
That is him. And, you know, I just did one of the things that I criticize other talk shows hosts about.
What's that?
Well,
having John Combest on the show?
No. When they have a guest, like what I just did, hey, this is John Combest, and he's a great guy, and he does all this great stuff, and he puts together this website. He should bring you into the conversation, the talk show host, immediately. John, how you doing this morning? Or, you know,
I'm doing pretty well. Thank you for that, Brad.
Okay.
And I'm doing quite well this morning. Thank you. How are you?
You know what? Let's talk about that next break, okay?
Okay, let's do it.
Anyway, we start the show off with John doing the top three. We bring in this high-profile guy. His name is...
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what he does is...
We're on our way to the number one.
He counts them down, and we start off with...
In third place.
This week, Brad, a story not based in Missouri, but in Detroit, Michigan. And it involves some Missouri people. There's a conservative political group called Turning Point USA. Have you heard of them, Brad?
Is this the Charlie Kirk organization?
It is. That's exactly right. This is the Charlie Kirk group. And a couple pieces that I wanted to mention today because they have ties to Missouri. Over the weekend, Politico, the political publication based in D.C., had a story with the headline, How Turning Point, once spurred by the Republican National Committee, is becoming Trump's force multiplier in battleground states. In other words, they have Turning Point USA has a group called Chase the Ballot. So the idea is that identifying through data areas where Republican turnout should be higher and using volunteers in key swing states and key districts to get young people predominantly to go out and turn out the Republican vote in November. I highlight this piece, Brad, because some key quotes in here, and this piece is written by a woman named Natalie Allison from Politico, and the story features Greg Keller. And Greg is not a part of Turning Point USA, but Greg has led national conservative groups in the past, done consulting for national candidates in the past, and gives some insight into why Turning Point was so successful. I'll leave that as a teaser, but Greg gets the all-important final quote in the Politico article about really what Charlie Kirk did and the bet that he placed on American politics that led Turning Point to be this successful.
Greg is the guy that I heard.
Go ahead, Brad.
Greg is the guy I heard in 97.1 one day when I was driving around, and I came in the middle of the conversation at 97.1, and he's the guy I go, wow, this guy's impressive, and I didn't know who it was. And you identify him as Greg Keller, and matter of fact, he actually sent us a nice little, at least he did on me, a nice little Twitter shot, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, a Twitter shout out. So Greg Keller, good old RGK, was quoted in that Politico piece, which was pretty cool. And in fact, Brad, I don't know if I was listening in the car yesterday to The Patriot or whether I was listening to 93.3, but I caught part of Charlie Kirk's story where he mentioned that. So actually, that's where I heard about the Politico story. The other thing I would mention about that convention taking place this week in Detroit, and I believe Trump will be there and will speak to the group on Saturday. Excuse me. The other thing I would mention is that Congressman Eric Burleson from the southwest part of the state actually spoke on stage, I believe it was yesterday, and has been heavily promoted by the Turning Point group in terms of being a good conservative voice and a leader. And then an issue near and dear to your heart, Brad, on Turning Point, Valentina Gomez has promoted on social media that she is at the Turning Point USA conference. Now, as I understand it, she has not been invited to speak to the group, although some were accusing her of suggesting that. There was a fun back and forth exchange. A gentleman named Marcos Zelada-Rodas. You could follow him, by the way. He's a great follow on Twitter. You can go to @Marcos, MARCOS_Mo. Play that back on the podcast if you need to hear that Twitter handle again. But Marcos pushed back and was like, look, Valentina, you are not a part of this group. You were not invited to speak. I've been a part of this group for a long time. Here's Marcos's quote. Unlike her, I've actually worked with TPUSA for years, and she is not a speaker. Yet she continues to lie about endorsements and much more. Now, for her part, Valentina Gomez has been posting pictures from Detroit of her posing in front of a backdrop with conservatives from around the country. So, I think we would say pretty par for the course for Valentina Gomez, right, Brad?
Okay, now, John, I'm gonna, you know what's coming, don't you?
Are you going to suggest we clog up the airways with Secretary of State candidates?
No. I'm just saying.
Oh, okay. What's coming?
I'm just saying this sort of reminds me. And by the way, Charlie Kirk is on Tracy's station on 93.3 and 106.8 and 104.2 and 92.7 and
14 other stations that she owns outright, as I understand.
Right. She bought them all. I think this is not good behavior by the Republicans to treat her this way. I really don't. I think this is. I think this is what Tracy Ellis does, where she paints you as a rhino, and you're a rhino. We don't talk to you, and once again, it's not like. See, this is what I'll never understand, and maybe this is my problem with politics. That wasn't it Ronald Reagan who used to talk about the big tent theory? The idea being
that for sure.
that we're Republicans or we're Democrats or whatever your political favorite party is, and you don't infight. You're not as Republican as I am, which essentially is what the rhino thing is all about. When you really take it, rhino is Republican in name only. So in other words, someone's calling themselves a Republican, but they're really not a Republican.
But hold on, Brad. I don't think that, for example, I don't think that's what Marcos is doing here. I think what he's saying is that, and I can't speak for him, but I think if you have somebody who's been involved in a group for a long period of time, and then you have someone who's suggesting or implying or outright stating that they're coming to that event, that they're going to be a speaker, that they've been invited, all this other stuff, and it's not true, I think it's perfectly fine for somebody to call that out, because that's candidates lie and exaggerate all the time, but if you do that, you got to be you have to expect somebody that has a real connection to the group to call you out on that.
Okay, this is counterpoint between John and I. Okay, let's say John goes to the XYZ church, and he's been a member of the XYZ church for 10 years. And John keeps telling, oh, Brad, this church is so good. They're so good. And the XYZ church. And on my Facebook page, I put on, you know what, after hearing all these great things, I've been invited to the XYZ church, and I'm going this Sunday. John would turn around and go, well, you haven't been here for the 9.5 years I've been here. You're not really a member of the XYZ church. Get what I'm saying?
I do get what you're saying, and it's a wildly flawed analogy, because you're not going out there saying, vote for me. You know what? They invited me to that church, and I'm giving the sermon on Sunday morning. Come see me. I'm going to give a sermon. And you know what? They've been begging me to come for a long time. And you know what? Vote for me, and I'm giving the sermon.
It's funny you should bring that up. Remind me to tell the story next break about the church dude who essentially didn't ask me. He told me I was going to do something for him. And when I told him that I would do it if I could reciprocate with him, he wasn't real happy with me.
Ooh, wow. I'm looking at a yin and yang image I have here in my office, Brad, and it reminds me of that. Speaking of yin and yang, how about a little back and forth between two other people? That's story number 2.
Oh, that must be a cue for me to hit the button.
Up a notch to number 2.
Midweek update came early. It's kind of like when Christmas comes early. Scott Fawn's midweek update, This Week in Missouri Politics, featured 2nd Congressional District Democratic primary candidate Ray Hartmann, Brad. I'll cut to the chase. They talked about abortion. They talked about Ann Wagner. They talked about RICA, everything with Coldwater Creek and Weldon Spring. The highlight, one key quote, Brad, that you should go back and listen to. And I might just spoil the punchline here for you anyway, but I have the timestamp, as always, on my website today. When Ray Hartmann was talking about RICA and was talking about Coldwater Creek and Weldon Spring, Scott Fawn, deadpan, asked about Weldon Spring and said, is that like on 40, like right where the Cracker Barrel is? And I don't think the joke landed with Ray Hartmann, because Ray spent the whole interview so obsessed with getting all of his points in as quickly as possible that I don't think that the joke landed. But I appreciated it. I thought it was the highlight and the funniest part of the interview. And then also, I think one point An interesting point about subsidies that Ray and Scott came to agreement on, Brad, and I think even you might agree with this. You ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
You know how the Cardinals are asking for $50 million for Busch Stadium?
Yeah, which is ridiculous. But yeah, keep going.
Scott's plan is that you put that money in escrow for 5 years, and you make it performance-based. So if the Cardinals win the division, they get X amount of money. They win the National League, they get a certain amount of money. They win the World Series, they get a certain amount of money. It's performance-based. Now, I think that's brilliant. You know, I'm not a subsidy guy. I think it's terrible. Scott points out that the Cardinals are Missouri's greatest asset. And I don't know. I think it's something that it could even bring a Brad Hildebrand to the table. To be serious for a minute, the other interesting tidbit that Ray dropped is he suggested that the National Democratic group that gets involved in these congressional races, called colloquially known as the D-Trip, the DCCC, Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, might get involved and might give Ray some money. Now, you know, Brad, I like Ray. I'm biased toward Ray. Ray's always been cool to me. I'll never say anything bad about Ray. I think Ray knows that he's probably not going to get any money from the DCCC. And the DCCC and the Republicans nationally, they flirt with congressional candidates and they, you know, dangle a carrot and say, maybe if you're good and you raise money, we'll throw in a couple $1,000s. Ray's not going to get any national money. But it's a compelling interview anyway. And you know, Ray is quite a unique character. He is not your typical congressional candidate, Republican or Democrat. And just to hear the back and forth between him and Scott is worth it. So I have that link up today with, as always, timestamps.
Okay, let me go back. You said Scott Fawn said the Cardinals are Missouri's biggest asset?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't agree with that, Brad?
I think I wouldn't even put him in the top 50.
Well, you're also quite biased against them, though, right?
No. It's see, here's what I don't get. I've talked about this before. You make a law, a new constitutional amendment, way up to 29 or 30 or something like that, that will phase out all men in government. And as of, let's say, we'll do it like we do with internal combustion engines. As of 2030, no men can serve in government anymore. Okay? And you look how much money goes toward government money, state, federal, you know, local, whatever, goes toward sports facilities and the crap that's going on the other side of the state with the Chiefs and the Royals. You look at how much money goes to sports facilities, and that would be zero. See, once again, I say that we have. It's just like with NFL, okay? Well, let's say when the Rams were back in St. Louis, okay? They play 8 games in St. Louis. 8 games, okay? The last time I checked, there are 365 days in the year. So in other words, subtract the 8 days from the Rams games from 365. You have what? What's the math on that? 257, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct, yeah.
257. Okay, there's 257 days when there are no Rams games. So what are they doing for the community? Nothing in the 257 games. The Cardinals, this is what's problematic to me. The Cardinals' current owners, do you know the backgrounds of the Cardinals' current owners?
In terms of the DeWitts, who've always owned a number of teams, or what?
Yeah, the DeWitts, you know what their background is?
No, what?
They're bankers. They used to own, if I'm not mistaken, at one point in time, they owned Southwest Bank, which this is going way back in history. You might not even remember this, but Southwest Bank was nationally known because Southwest Bank was the bank that always went ahead of everybody else with loan rates. They would Southwest Bank in St. Louis dropped the loan rate to 2.833, and they were always the ones who were in front of that. Okay, the DeWitts could wiggle their little finger and get 20 banks to lend them $50 million. I mean, that would be like a no-brainer. That would be like you or me going to the bank and saying, hey, could you give me a penny out of your cash drawer and I'll be back tomorrow and I'll give you the penny back? And they'd say, oh, yeah, no problem. We'll trust you with a penny. Here's a penny. See you tomorrow. I mean, that to me is, but once again, they want state money. Why? Because the stadium's falling apart? Give me a break. You know, I mean, see, to me, that is like kick in the teeth to fans. It's a kick in the teeth to the city. It's a kick in the teeth to the state. They don't need the state money. They've got more of their own money. And the crazy thing about it is that I'm going to go exactly opposite what you say with the performance, what Scott says, the performance incentives. I'd say, okay, you guys need $50 million to fix up, the stadium. Don't sign two free agents next year, and you'll have your $50 million. Get what I'm saying?
You talk about a kick in the teeth, Brad. With the remaining 2 minutes of this segment, let's talk about a little faith healing. That's number one.
The number one.
Good news, Brad. I think you're going to address it in the next segment, it sounds like. It sounds like you teased it. Some stuff going on with you. I think for both your heart, your eyeball, your lungs, anything you need, Brad, we have a valuable natural resource here in St. Louis that is not the Cardinals. No, it is faith healer Cori Bush. In a recently resurfaced interview that she did with PBS, she talked a little bit about, from her autobiography, the work she has done as a faith healer. She had a toddler that couldn't walk. Cori Bush laid hands upon the toddler, and the toddler walked. A woman had cancerous tumors, Brad. Cori Bush put her hand on the tumors, and the tumors melted away. Fox News has the story. The New York Post has the story, along with PBS interviews. They're near the top of my website today. It's great news for everyone. I was wondering going into, there's 2 months left until the Democratic primary, and I didn't know if Cori Bush would be able to pull kind of a rabbit out of a hat. But it looks like, Brad, with the recently resurfaced news about faith healing, she might be able to help more St. Louisans than we ever anticipated.
I saw this yesterday and thought to myself, how old is this interview? She looks fairly young in the interview.
Yeah, it was only 2 years ago.
Oh, okay, interesting. I thought it was older than that.
Yeah, well, I guess her autobiography came out in 2022, and the PBS interview, I believe, is from 2022 that she talked about it. But, when you're under a lot of stress, Brad, you could age quickly. So it's remarkable. And there will be people, I think, that doubt the veracity of these. I think you and I both believe that mentality and how you feel. And I think you and I probably both believe in the placebo effect to some extent. So,
John,
who's to say that she's not a real faith healer?
John, I once again will debate. You and I are going to go back and forth this morning. I'll debate you and Scott Fawn. The state's number one asset is not the Cardinals. It's Cori Bush. Now,
it might be Cori Bush.
I
right?
I understand, and I don't know if it's true or not. I've heard a rumor that today Cori Bush is going down to Busch Stadium. I think she's going to be there around 2 o'clock. She's going to put her hands on Busch Stadium, and all the problems that need to be fixed with $50 million are going to be fixed. The plumbing, that urinal that leaks on the second level, punk, no more leaks. She's got to put her hands.
Fixed, I know. And the best part is she worked out a deal where that $50 million, instead of going to stadium renovations, it goes just to private security. She knows a guy.
Yeah, I think she does. I think she's married to him now. Okay.
You should also listen real quick. You should also listen when you listen to the Ray Hartmann interview. Ray has a back and forth with Scott about Ameren and the Labadie plant and how hippies want the price of expense of electricity to go up. It's near and dear to your heart.
So
go ahead.
Okay, let's pick that up. You piqued my interest on that because we have to take a break.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?